Welcome to Hiking Adventures with Mark Winfield. In June 2018, Patty and I hiked the West Highland Way. Now, this was before I started doing videos, so this is actually a narrated slideshow presentation. We traveled to Mulgai, where the trail starts, via train from Glasgow. The West Highland Way originally opened in 1980 and is part of the International Appalachian Trail. Our first day's hike was about 22 kilometers, 14 miles, and the first two-thirds was primarily through agricultural land. We saw some animals, and the last one-third was a bit hilly. Along the way was the GLENCOE distillery, which was just off the trail. We stopped and took a look around and took in the gift shop. It was quite busy the day that we were there. We arrived at our charming bed and breakfast at the edge of the village of Dryman and had supper at the oldest licensed pub in Scotland, the Clachan. Our vacation was organized as a self-guided tour with Max Adventures. And what they did is they arranged for all of the accommodations, and they shuttled our bags from location to location every day. So we only carried day packs. After a nice breakfast, we headed out on the trail, which was a bit rougher today. We saw a lot of sheep today, and the countryside was generally more rugged. The hike today was quite a bit shorter. It was only 13 kilometers, about 8 miles, and towards the end we had to climb CONIC Hill, which wasn't too bad going up, but it was very steep going down, and we were glad we had our hiking poles. From CONIC Hill, we caught our first views of Loch Lomond, which we would be hiking next to for the next few days, and also saw the geographic fault that divides the lowlands from the highlands. I'm a fan of craft beer, and this Belhaven brew was the best that I had on the whole trip. Balmaha was a small little village and had just an excellent hotel. It was a busy little spot, and it had one tiny store, which was the last store we would see for 4 days. Our tour company provided us with this excellent guidebook that helped us along the way, and that's how we knew that we weren't going to see another store for 3 days or 4 days. Today's hike was similar in distance to the previous day at about 13 kilometers, 8 miles, and we hiked for a couple of kilometers until we got to Loch Lomond, and then it got a little bit hilly, and we were in the woods, along the shoreline, back in the woods, and so on. And much of the day we were in quite remote country that was not populated, though you could see civilization across the lake. We weren't yet in the highlands, but we could see them. This was our first day of hiking significantly in the woods, and we came to understand why Scottish people complain so much about midges. We arrived at ROWARDENNAN, to a very nice hotel at the edge of the lake, and had very nice rooms and a nice pub out back, but no air conditioning. While we were in Scotland, we were there during essentially what was a heat wave, very warm weather, not what they are used to there. We made the mistake, because it was a warm night, of opening the windows, which had screens on them. But unfortunately, the midges flew right through the screens because they're such tiny bugs, and we really regretted that. We were traveling to INVERSNAID today, and the trail was a little rougher, steeper, a moderately difficult hike. The geography was varied. We saw quite a few waterfalls and streams. There were a lot of songbirds. We came across this hiker's shelter that had some ancient ruins next to it. Lots of great views across the lake. Our hotel the night before was in a very remote location, and the hike today, as it had been the day before, was through a very unpopulated area. And we came around a corner on the hike, we were away from the lake, and came across this unexpected cafe literally in the middle of nowhere. The lady had just opened it a couple of months before. It wasn't in the guidebooks, nobody knew it was there. She lived in the house nearby, lived off-grid, and ran this little cafe for hikers coming through. What a treat. We arrived at INVERSNAID, which was a place that wouldn't even qualify as a village, but it was right by the lake. And the main industry there was a luxury hotel, though we had to climb up a bit of a nasty hill to get to our hiker hostel, which was in a converted church. It was really nice. Day 5 to INVERARANAN was probably the toughest day of the hike. It was about 15 kilometers, 9 miles, and the first 2/3 was along the edge of the LOCH and was on a very rough trail that we often had to use our hands on, climbing up over rocks and roots. It was an ancient forest. It was a pretty cool thing to see. On the previous days, we met quite a few people from all over the world and had conversations and heard about their travels and so on. And today, there was virtually nobody on the trail. We later found out that there was a ferry from INVERSNAID to INVERARANAN, and that a lot of hikers took the ferry to skip over this rough section of trail. The last 1/3 of the hike was on hillsides, fairly easy going, and eventually we got to a sort of cottage complex on a bit of a farm where we stopped and had a beer and then made our way to our hotel for the night. Our hotel for the night was the INVERARANAN Drover's Inn. A drover is a person who moves animals from one place to another. We had a very nice supper in the main building in the pub that was there and stayed in modern motel units across the road. Day 6 to TYNDRUM was our longest day on the trail. We were out for approximately 9 hours. It was 26 kilometers, 16 miles, and we got rained on for the last hour of our hike. On the previous days, we'd met lots of people, and most of our conversations with them lasted probably 15 minutes, and then we just carried on down the trail. Today we met early on Peter and Leslie, who were a couple of engineers, newlyweds, and were from Scotland. And we hiked all morning with them and learned all about Scotland. It was great. Along the way, we went off trail to take a look at the small town of Cranelidge, which in retrospect we probably wouldn't do again. It was a nice little place, but we should have stayed on trail. We arrived at the village of TYNDRUM, a great spot where we stayed in a bed and breakfast for 2 nights. Our hike to INVERORAN was an easy one. It was about 16 kilometers, 10 miles on a warm day. We saw a lot of sheep and cows, bovines, along the way, and realized that we hadn't actually seen any cultivated land, only pasture land. About midday, we arrived at the bridge of Orchy, where there was an upscale hotel there where we had just a great lunch and a beautiful glass of wine. After we crossed the Bridge of Orkney, we had a bit of a hike uphill through the woods until we came out on the crest of a hillside and saw Loch TULIA. And this loch was probably the most scenic landscape I've ever seen in my life. We arrived at the inn at INVERORAN, which was our stopping point for the day, gave our shuttle a call, and had a brew while we were waiting for our shuttle to arrive. Day 8 to GLENCOE Mountain was another easy day, about 15 kilometers, 10 miles, and it was completely unsheltered the whole way. In the course of our hike, we moved from the lowlands to the highlands, and clearly now we were among the Scottish Highlands, traveling through valleys. We arrived at GLENCOE Mountain, the site of a ski hill, and normally you'd stay there, but the hotel was under construction. So we got our shuttle to GLENCOE Village, which was a beautiful lakeside spot. Our shuttle picked us up after breakfast in GLENCOE Village and took us back to where we'd left off at GLENCOE Mountain, and then we traveled to Kinloch Leven. Today was about 16 kilometers, 10 miles, and it was a fairly tough day, and the main reason it was tough is we had a nasty climb up Devil's Staircase. We had lunch at the top of Devil's Staircase and started the long, slow decline to the village of Kinloch Leven. This was a town that was established quite some time ago to create a power generating facility. Day 10 was the final day of our hike, 26 kilometers, 16 miles to Fort William. The day started with a steep climb through the woods that turned into a gradual climb out in the open up to Larigmore Pass, 866 meters, about 2,800 feet, a significant climb. The remaining 20 kilometers was in theory downhill, but in fact it was endless PUDs. PUDs is hiker speak for pointless ups and downs. We descended to Fort William through gravel roads through the woods and eventually made it to the edge of town and traveled to the center of town, which is the actual end of the West Highland Way. The West Highland Way, at 154 kilometers, 96 miles, was the first of our long-distance hikes. We had excellent weather and saw just the greatest sights and met the nicest people. We really liked the self-guided format where we had a hotel room to stay in every night and our bags were shuttled from place to place. A very civilized way to hike. Patty and I would highly recommend this hike to anybody who wants an adventure. I hope you enjoyed this video and invite you to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.